we are here on Made of the Sea with Jenny at Green Turtle Cay in the Abacos.
This video is difficult for me. I didn't even tell a lot of people for a long time what happened because it felt like such a failure. But I've learned a lot of lessons, and the whole point of putting this video out there is, one, you should follow Wildly Intrepid because they're amazing. I love you guys. But two, the whole point is to hopefully help somebody learn something to prevent or how to react in an emergent situation like this. So be kind in your judgments. Maybe any negative comments keep to yourself, but just that's how we learn. We learn from each other and each other's mistakes. So
yeah, so I was demasted on a beautiful day.
What was the sea like that day?
Yeah, it was like 3 foot, 3, maybe 4 at times. The wind had been like 15 to 20. The max I saw was like 22. And I had a reef in the main and probably only 100 out on the head sail. I was about 5 or 6 miles in front of both other buddy boats, Spirit Bird and Turned Out.
And at that point we weren't actually with them. We had gone ahead to Foxtown, and we were just getting bits and pieces on the radio when they got closer to us that all of this was happening. And Jenny seemed so calm on the radio, and I was just mesmerized by that.
I guess in my head I wasn't, but I've been a trauma nurse for almost 15 years now in the ICU, and so I think when like an emergency happens, maybe all of my training is just like you react and deal with the situation, and then, you know, after the emergency is over, then everything sets in. The shaking, the holy shit, did that just happen? The rigging is, you know, they say with under 10 years your rigging is good, which it is. I've had it inspected on February 9th by a 20-year experienced rigger who, after looking at everything on the boat, said, and I quote, "I would sail this boat anywhere and tomorrow." And I did contact him, and he was just shocked with what happened. But it goes to show you that you can't see inside of a chain plate. And so my demasting occurred from the head sail chain plate corroding from the inside out. That plate broke, and it is the only thing holding my mast forward. And since I was in a close haul sail, which means I was sailing directly into the wind, as soon as that plate broke, the mast just came straight back onto the cockpit. So there was no chance of tying halyards down and trying to stabilize the mast. Yeah, so it all came down in one huge swoop. More than anything, I feel like I was lucky I didn't get injured. I had the Traveler to leeward. I had already reefed the main, and I had reefed the head sail, and so I wasn't even heeling that much. I was cruising at like 5.5 knots, sometimes like 6, and I had autopilot set and was sitting right there in that seat. The mast fell to windward, and the only thing I could think is that the boom was to leeward over here, and when everything came down, the boom hit the deck and pushed the mast to the side. So as you can see, this little bimini frame saved me too. This took the brunt of it, and all these lifelines. When it came down, it felt like it was slow motion, but really fast. I travel with my first mate, Romeo, my little dog, and he was leashed in right here, and I was leashed in back there, but I have enough on my jack lines to be able to get anywhere in the cockpit, and he has enough to get right in the companionway. So when it came down, I jumped up, grabbed him, and dove into here, and it just was so loud. And then honestly, oh, he wants to tell his side of the story too. I feel like after it came down, I sat right here, and to be honest, I feel like I blacked out for a second. Like I wasn't injured, but it was like too much for my brain to grasp onto, that when I looked out, the whole companionway was covered with the mainsail, and my mast was bouncing over there. So I just kind of sat here for a second, like, I don't know how long, because time in the whole situation doesn't make sense, but and then my autopilot was still on, so I jumped up and turned my autopilot off. I had the keys right here, and I had been on that port tack for quite a while, and I knew I was going to head straight to these coral heads and make one more tack that would have led me to Allen's Pensacola, so I knew I was heading towards these coral heads. So then I looked at my navigation to see where I was. I was pretty close to them. So I started the engine and tried to turn myself around from going straight to the coral heads, and that wasn't a clear thought in my head. Like, you can't drive a sailboat with all this mast hanging in the water and a mainsail, and then I instantly realized I don't know where any of the rigging is and what is in the water, so I instantly took it out of gear, turned the engine off. Then I was like, okay, I need to start trying to hail an emergency, and then I was like, actually no, I need to get the anchor down. So I couldn't get out of the cockpit. There was running rigging and rigging, and the mainsail totally draping the whole companionway. So I put my PFD on, I strapped my satellite phone to me, I strapped my portable VHF to me, and I lifted a whole bunch of stuff and got out there. I literally had to climb underneath all this. The boom was right here coming over. I couldn't get out from anything. He was freaking out. So I left him here right for the moment, and I literally army crawled with all the safety gear that I put on, which I probably should have waited, dropped the anchor. Luckily it happened in 20 feet of water, so I dropped the anchor and I came back. And another thing, you're in this shock and you always have your VHF. So this is my, strongest VHF. So I, sat right here holding him, and, I'm just looking at the mast, like, just still not believing it. You know how to call pon-pons and maydays, but it is totally different when you are actually having to say your boat name in one of those. You never have to do that. Pon-pon, 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 3 times. I'm like, this is made of the sea. I've been demasted. Does anybody copy? And I even just saying it is like, gives me goosebumps, because you just never think you're going to call that on your own. And no response. And I'm like, I thought you guys were at Foxtown, so I was like, surely they will hear me. This is like the best antenna of all the boats that I travel with. And I did that about 2 times, I think, as I'm looking back at everything, and then I'm like, oh my gosh, this thing is useless. The wires are probably ripped out. This antenna is on the top of my mast, which is now in the water. So I'm like, oh my gosh, okay, like, it's not, my clearest thought. So then I take my handheld VHF, and, everybody else was so far behind me, I knew that my handheld probably wouldn't reach. So I called Pon on 16, I got on our buddy channel, tried hailing them. And so I was like, okay, I just have to start dealing with this, by myself. And I think there's this, like, realization that when you're on land, if you have an emergency or a medical emergency or anything, you have everything at your fingertips with a phone call. And I had this realization that I am totally on my own right now to deal with this, and I just need to deal with it. I knew eventually they would be able to see. It's really easy to spot a sailboat without the mast, without the mainsail. And I just knew it would take a while for them to get to me. So I grabbed my ditch bag and put it up here, and I had my kayak on the davit, so I knew I could ditch the boat if I needed to. But at that point, I still wasn't exactly sure what the damage was. But with the swell that I was in and on anchor and a sailboat with no mast, it was just violent the way it was rocking the boat, and the mast was just bouncing and crashing and bouncing. And so I had bolt cutters, ran down, got wrenches, knife, just anything that I would need up there. I climbed up on deck with all the tools and the bolt cutters that I thought I would never need, so they were buried in this lazarette. A piece of advice to any sailor: even if your rig is to sail anywhere in tomorrow, I would say make sure you have bolt cutters. Some of the turnbuckles were so bent, you know, you can undo these, but when your mast is bouncing around as much as it was, you're kind of in a situation you got to save your boat. You know, the worst thing that can happen to a sailor is you capsize your boat and sink your boat. And this is just my personal opinion. I think the second worst thing you can do is have a demasting. And demasting could quickly turn into, number one, a capsize by putting a hole in your hull. I just wanted to get everything off the boat. Try to save what I could, but just get it off the boat. Yeah, so I was trying to assess what lines were holding the mast on, if there was a way to pull it on deck with a winch or the windlass. And honestly, there was only like maybe 6 feet of the mast on the boat. So looking at the whole mainsail out and everything, it seemed kind of impossible. It's a huge mast. And how much of it was in the water, it seemed impossible. And then trying to either put it on the side with the shrouds sticking out of it to drag it, I knew I wasn't going to build a motor, and there was no way I was going to get it on deck. So I was kind of just pulling lines through, assessing what was holding what, and then I realized Spirit Bird was a lot closer and probably in radio range, and Spirit Bird answered, and again, having to say, hey, this is Made of the Sea, I've been demasted, I need help.
So my name's Andy, and I sail with my girlfriend Megan on sailing vessel Spirit Bird. I remember looking at the boat and going, you know, I don't see the rig, but I clearly see the boat. And so I yelled down to Megan and I said, Megan, I need your eyes because I don't feel like I can see her rig. And she, as soon as I said that, she said, over the radio, I've been demasted. Man, it was like, you know, something that would send chills down your spine, especially if you're a sailor, because you know, it's the essence of the sailboat, right? Is the rig and the sails. And
she just so calmly in response said, we'll be right there. But I felt a little bit better knowing that finally they knew and they were on their way. And turned out was behind them. So they couldn't hear me on the radio, but they heard Spirit Bird say, we're on our way. You know, that's just not something that goes through your head in the conditions that we were in. So they thought maybe I ran aground, hit the reefs or something. Spirit Bird relayed to them, Made of the Sea's been demasted and needs help. And Andy said he looked at Kristen, and there's 2 Andys in this story. Andy looked at Kristen on Turned Out and said, she must not know what that word means. And he said, come again, and she said, Made of the Sea's been demasted and needs help. So everybody dropped their sails and apparently motored way higher on their RPMs than they're supposed to try to get to me. So I would say by the time Spirit Bird got to me, it was about maybe an hour from the time that it had happened. Maybe it was less. It felt like forever. Yeah, so I was just basically pulling, running, rigging through. I came back and was trying to get the topping lift. Was all the way across my arch and all my solar panels. And I was trying to get that off. I was trying to just prevent any other breakage while things were going on. And they anchored. Andy jumped in the water and came over and started helping. And we were able to save the head sail and the furler. We went in the water and unhooked the forestay, and it's so light we could just pull it in, rolled it up, and stuck it on the port side of the deck. But I didn't want anybody going in the water by the main and the mast, just from the shrouds and the rigging. It was just bouncing so violently. And so he just kept asking me, you know, you're the captain, it's your decision. And I just kept saying, I think we should just cut everything off. Like, we're not going to get it on deck. And so we were just, you know, removing the backstays and the chain plates. Yeah, so we saved some things, but we tried getting the mainsail off. The sail was only 2 years old. But we could get it off the boom track. But because of the battens and the rigging being over it, we couldn't pull the mainsail off the mast, and I didn't want anybody going in there to do it. It was just getting ripped to shreds on everything over here. There was just tears all through it, so it seemed like a waste anyways to try to spend too much more time.
We couldn't save the mast. It was too heavy for us to pull it up. So as we were like just trying to get pieces of it, it just started to fall, and it was banging the side of the boat.
Mostly me in the cockpit, letting each running rigging line loose one at a time, trying to let the mast go off in the safest way possible, with the boom slamming this way. And I mean, these were they're all broken. They don't want to unlatch because there was so much tension in all of these lines holding the whole mast to the deck. And honestly, the boom bang was the thing really holding it. You know, everything was stowed in the boat, but we were in the Sea of Abaco, and it was supposed to be, you know, pretty light conditions. So things were just tossed in the boat, and just getting hit by waves broadside is probably the most uncomfortable thing.
It was kind of eye-opening. You know, you hear about demastings, and you try to anticipate them, and even when you do all the right things, and you've got a fresh rig with inspections, and there's still stuff that can be missed. You can't anticipate every possible failure point. You just do the best you can, and when it goes wrong, make the next right decision and cut it free if you can't save it.
I want to say the whole thing from start to finish took like about 2 hours. And for everybody's safety on board and the boat, to save the boat, for me the best decision was to cut everything off. So when it was off the side, the way that it was hanging over the deck and the lifelines, it looked like it had a big bend in it from when it came down and hit here and then hit there. It was angled like sideways. So as we were trying to decide if we could get it back on board somehow, looking at it, I was like, it doesn't even look salvageable anyways. We dove it after it was in the water to make sure nothing was up at water level where another boat could hit any of it, and to make sure everything was out of the way of my prop. Because now, obviously, without a mast and a sail, my only way to get to a safe anchorage for the night was my motor.
Mad props to Jenny for handling it like a champion. I would have been a mess. She said, "What do we do now?" Or "Here's what we do now," and she's safe. And I guess that's what's important, right? We want to preserve our season and have everything go perfectly, but ultimately we all want to do this safely.
And so after it was all said and done, I think that's when everything kind of hit me after. Kind of hit me. I don't think it really took a hold till a couple days later. And Andy from Spirit Bird was standing right here, and I was just sitting right here, just, and, he was just like, take your time, it's a lot to take in. And I think I said something like, man, I've been through some scary stuff on the ocean, but it was terrifying to start, for sure. Like so much so that, my brain couldn't comprehend it for, it could have been seconds, but it felt like minutes. But all in all, I mean, there's some blood on deck. It's still there. Just some scratches, and maybe it looked like someone took a bat to my legs just from being thrown around and bouncing around everywhere, but nobody was hurt. The boat, handled well and doesn't have a hole in her, and the engine is solid. So we went to safe anchorage for the night. I had so many things running through my head driving the boat. And again, the swell was really the only thing that was really uncomfortable, and on a demasted boat, you're like a bobbing cork. They in solidarity, motored all the way in with me. They said they didn't want to, go sailing by, but followed me all the way into the anchorage. They said it looked pretty violent, the way the boat was bouncing all around. There was nothing I could have done differently. I did everything that people say to do. The inspections, it was in the yearly amount of age of the rigging that it was supposed to be. And basically this like 1.5 inch chain plate took my entire rig down. And you know, this was now, what, 2 weeks ago, I think? And my family still doesn't even know. There was this, you know, as a solo sailor, I had all these people believing in me and just supporting me, and every bit further I got, you know, saying, you're doing it, we believe in you. And so there was this sense of, I failed, and I don't know how to tell them that this happened, even though there was nothing I could do. So it's been really great. There's been bad weather, so everybody's in this anchorage together. And my local friend George, I had a friend that donated me this dock, so I got to come in here and just tie up and relax for a little bit after the whole scenario. But so that last like 8 miles or however much I had to motor, there was a lot of that. I sort of started breaking down into a cry, and then I was like, not yet, like not until you're anchored, just you got to make it there first. And then actually I radioed everybody after they anchored if they wanted to come over on the boat, and I put a bunch of beer in the fridge, and some vodka was brought over, and needless to say, everybody was a little traumatized from it, and we just partied our asses off that night, to be honest, and it was awesome. You know, if you go through something like that with people, you're just bonded for life. Like, there's this, they'll be family forever, like, to be there for me when it happened, and so much support and help. Like, I couldn't have done it without them. I mean, I could have cut things and pushed it off, but it would have taken me hours, and I could have been injured. Who knows? I'm just really glad that they were there. And yeah, so woke up with a hangover the next day and motored to Safe Harbor in Green Turtle, which was like another 8 hours in a bobbing 25-knot headwind. And the last few miles before I got into Green Turtle, my friend George rode out on a motorboat and brought me a cooler of a little red cooler, and brought the motorboat up right to here, and I leaned over and he handed it to me, and there was a cheeseburger and 3 beers in it, and just in total shit. Waves coming over the cockpit, just so unsteady in the boat. And yeah, it brought me right into here, and you know, Green Turtle Key has been amazing, and all of you guys have been amazing, and yeah, so the sailing community has just really, you know, put their arms around me. And
can I give you a hug?
Yeah.
You're doing it.
Yeah, just a step back.
Yeah, I mean,
guess I got to take her back to the States now, and I'm not sure if they're gonna total it. I have to get a new boat, or honestly, you should practice any emergency drills like that. Like, just know where all your gear is on your boat, and quickly. I think the biggest thing was, you know, maybe from my story you'll know, like, don't use the that, which was only like a minute or two of time, but bolt cutters were a huge thing for me. If I had not had those, I don't know how long it would have taken us to get the rig off. And then, you know, when I commercial fished in Alaska, our captain always had us have a Vicky knife on us, which was just this sharp knife, and we were not allowed to use it for anything. You couldn't gill a fish, you couldn't cut a tomato. That knife was never to be used, so it was the sharpest knife when you did need it. And, you know, cutting the topping lift, cutting some of the running rigging that we couldn't get off, having stuff like that on your boat, I think, is so important. And to know that everything else is replaceable. So if you have to get rid of everything to keep the people safe on the boat that are helping you, to keep the hull of your boat intact, and then to get somewhere safe, you know, afterwards, all that stuff is replaceable. And I've actually been told by multiple people that's probably a better thing to do, is just cut it off and save what you can, but cut it off and save yourself, save your boat. But I think those were my biggest takeaways. And if you are solo, you know, I have a satellite phone. I could have pushed SOS if I needed to. You know, your handheld only reaches so far. I'm in another country, my phone isn't activated. You need to have those things in mind if you are not with buddy boats. And even if you are, it could take them a long time to get to you. That you need to have a backup plan on communication for sure. So the other safety thing that I had thought about before is knowing where exactly to find your latitude, longitude. And I know that sounds really funny, but on like Navionics, it doesn't really say it. My sat phone, I have to go to a certain tracking spot to find it. And so that was another thing. I was going through my sat phone trying to find my exact location for the pon, and I felt like it took me longer than I realized. And so knowing exactly what electronics you're using, you know, some of them will have them on your radios, and also if you have an anchor alarm app on your phone, which you don't need service for, it also tells you your longitude. So just thinking of those types of things and how quickly you need to respond, some of those things slowed me down a little bit. So that would be probably my other piece of advice.
She's a champion. Like, rugged, brutal rugged. Such a champ about it. Didn't miss a beat. So, we followed her to Foxtown to make sure she's okay.
Feels like a little bit of a rodeo, but Romeo's doing good. Have taken a couple pretty hard slams. Hopefully she holds up all right, and when we get out of the bank soon, maybe we'll stop getting our asses beat here. Now we're turning in the direction we need to go, and I'm taking the waves on this side, which is super uncomfortable. Hopefully it's not too long like this. I can't be down below, it's too rough. Romeo's kind of freaking out, and I can't really be too much in the cockpit because now it's getting soaked in there. So I'm kind of just sitting in the companionway. This was full of water up to here, and as you see, all my wiring, everything's right there. Waves were coming up onto the swim deck, and this is usually closed and latched, but with the tow it was creating an eddy here, and then the swell was coming up as well. So both of these hatches were full of water, about 2.5 to 3 feet, so a lot of water. And then this drains into a hatch under my bed. And so then it was going under the engine and into the bilges inside. This was totally full and splashing up underneath my bed. This drains into my engine, and this was full. And then it follows the bilge, and here's where my bilges were, or my float switches, and that was full. So in the swell, I was back in here, also bilging into a bucket. Can't thank Valiant Marine Salvage for everything they did. Roston McGregor was amazing. You know, I didn't know the deck hull joint had separated during the dismasting and didn't realize it until we got into crossing, and just everything Roston did to try to make my ride more comfortable for me, and then being stuck in the Lucaya Canal for 2 weeks waiting for a better window, setting drogues to help stabilize the boat, just giving me encouragement over the VHF that we were going to make it all right. I do a lot of what ifs. What if I had been sailing downwind? Would I have had time to save the mast if I hadn't been closed haul? Could I have seen it that morning when I pulled the anchor? Were one of my tacks too hard on the chain plate? Like, you know, all these questions, but I realized I can't control the wind, I can't control the elements, and shit's gonna break on a sailboat that lives on the ocean. So I have come at peace with that, and now I do tell people the story of my dismasting when for so long I felt ashamed of it. And you know, now I'm on my new boat, Tiama, and I'm getting ready to circumnavigate and leave from Hawaii, and I couldn't be happier to share this story. So be gentle when you watch it with your judgments. It could happen to anybody, and I do feel like I did everything possible to prevent it, but it happens. Limping back into, you know, my Fort Pierce Marina at Harbor Town to my sailing mom, Jen Stride, and my sailing dad, Michael Gorowitz, and just the whole marina embracing me after what I went through and feeling so defeated. And so, of course, my really good friends, Shane and Bronwyn Lucan, taking me in, and all my friends in Melbourne, my family, who coincidentally I didn't actually tell exactly what had happened for quite a while, but just my friends, non-sailing friends, just once everybody hearing what happened, really embracing me and telling me it was okay, and that I'm not a failure. It just was a failure in an attempt to circumnavigate at that moment in that boat. So just everybody was so incredible, and I love you all very much, and thank you so much. Obviously your rigging is the most important thing, and even though it was going to be a short sail that day, I pulled anchor right by my headsail chain plate and never once visualized it. I have no idea if there was a huge crack that I could have seen. I just did my normal checks to start the engine, go pull the anchor, left, and set sail. And although everything that happened was out of my control with the micro cracks that was found in the metal of the chain plate, so the salt water was getting in there all the time and the corrosion, I honestly didn't visualize it that morning, or any of the rigging. I pulled anchor and set sail. So that was a very important lesson I learned after. I also learned that if you do carry insurance, which luckily I had Bohemian insurance, make sure you have collateral damage, because my regular insurance would not have covered it. They don't cover corrosion or wear and tear on a sailboat that lives in the ocean. So that's very confusing, but yeah, so they didn't cover the chain plate that had been corroding from the inside out, but they did cover the collateral damage of losing the entire rig and the rig breaking apart the deck hull joint. So luckily my insurance did a full payout of the sailboat. Otherwise, without the collateral damage, I would have just had a total loss financially. And probably the biggest thing I learned, which I already knew, but it was how everybody in the sailing community embraced me afterwards. You know, I became a member of a club I never wanted to be, and you know, from George Cross coming out and delivering me a cheeseburger as I limped into Green Turtle Key, from all my buddy boats, Turned Out, Spirit Bird, Wildly Intrepid, just totally embracing me, even crying with me at times. My tow operator from Roston McGregor and his girlfriend Ashley, just taking care of me my whole way back to the U.S., which was a wild ride in its own thing. But yeah, I couldn't have done anything emotionally or physically after just the way I was embraced and taken care of helped me get through it. And if you'd like to see what I'm up to currently, I started a page for friends and family to follow me on my solo circumnavigation attempt, leaving from Kailua Kona in the Big Island. I'm on a Bristol 35.5C now, and she actually just finished a circumnavigation with Dustin Reynolds, the single-handed sailor. But yeah, you could follow me at Just a Lap on Facebook, or just_a_lap on Instagram.